But my one of my most recent roles was I was the former global CISO for Grant Thornton, also Manpower Group, and I was the Chief Administrative Officer for Information Security for Northern Trust. But what I've been working on the last year, I've been working on a new book. I decided that I was going to take a year and write something that the CISOs could use and leverage to help their own security programs. So that's been my life over the last year. It's called CISO Compass. And a lot of the CISOs, including some of the ones that were on this panel, have written chapters for me. About 75 CISOs contributed to that. So I think that just shows the collaboration that we have in this industry and the networking and the willingness that people have to help each other when it's needed. 67% of CISOs believe that their organizations are more likely to fail victim to a cyber attack or data breach in 2018. 67%, and these are the people that have the jobs. 69% anticipate the roles will be more stressful. 63% believe information security budgets will decline or remain flat. And this is what they're afraid of too, data breach. You know what happens when you have a data breach? You get out alarms, right? Is everybody excited now? Are you excited? I don't feel like you're feeling a data breach like it really is. Like I think you really need to know there's a data breach going on right now. What are we going to do? What are you going to do, ma'am? Not sure? What are you going to do, sir?
Shut down the system.
Shut down the system. And you, sir, what are you going to do? We have a data breach right now. You got to make a decision this moment.
Shut down the system.
So just shut down the system. Anybody else going to do anything besides shut down the system?
Call you.
Call me. Call me. What about you?
Contain it.
Contain it. How are you going to contain it?
I got to see where the breach came through.
See where it comes through. Good.
Call the police.
Call the police. Call the police. Let's call the police. Let's do that. That's running around with hair on fire. We don't necessarily want to do that, do we? So what's the question? A, what's the question? Number A, letter A. How many breaches in a year? Possible breaches? Cost of breaches? People that got impacted. 11 billion records have been breached so far. 500 million, what about that number? That's how many so far this year records have been breached. And what about 8,229? Pretty close, the number of breaches coming up to those numbers. Those are pretty big numbers, and those are just getting bigger. No, you can't read this. I don't know if you're going to get the slides or not, but we have to look at the different incident patterns that are driving these breaches. Verizon puts out a great report. There's a lot of great stuff in there. Not all industries are the same. As you can imagine, the payment skimmers are going to be more, or card skimmers are going to be more applicable to the financial industry than they are healthcare, right? So we have to look at the intersection of those breaches. There's a lot of different things that we can do. One of those is having a CISO. And actually having a CISO reduces your cost by $5.02 a record. The average cost per record is $141 a record. But you can do other things too. Having an incident response team, $19.30 by having a response team. So thinking about what it's going to cost up front has a big impact, and so forth. And you'll see down below things like, let's see, third-party involvement. Now that starts to cost us money, $16.90. We have a lot of different attack patterns to minimize this risk. We can do things like software updates. We can make sure that we're doing security awareness training to handle cyber espionage. We have denial of service, so we can test our DDoS mitigation services. We need to, I'm not going to read all these, but we need to encrypt things for data loss. You heard on the panel talk earlier about that. That's kind of the one get out of jail free card if you can give that kind of assurance. It's an easy job. Here's a job description of what's needed. We can see a visionary leader is needed. They need to know business management. They must know information technology. They must communicate this at all levels of the organization. They need to have safety, privacy, and recovery of information owned or processed by the business in compliance with legal requirements. That's pretty easy stuff, right? I don't know who these people are, but this is a tough job. And then there's more qualifications, certifications, knowing things about information technology. And the process is simple. All you need to do is start as a programmer analyst, become a security analyst, then get some certifications and training, then oversee a security team, then get an MBA with an IT security focus, and then you get promoted to CISO. Sounds pretty logical, right? Pretty straightforward. This is actually on a website. Now, you have to, it's adapted from a website promoting cybersecurity education in an institution. Okay, so you can see there might be just a little bit of bias here. So where do the CISOs come from? They're born as natural paranoid leaders, raise their hand at the wrong time in a meeting, didn't attend the selection meeting. They were the last IT guy in the shop. They worked on the compliance stuff, so they must know something about security. And they chose this career. Not really playing with a full deck. I'm proposing that there's 5 stages of a CISO evolution, and I go into this in a lot more detail. But the first stage is where we really had limited security. So if we go back to 1995, I mean, everybody thinks we need to have a CISO today, but it wasn't always that way. Anybody know who the first CISO was? Yes, John? Steve Katz at Citibank. And this was in New York, and this was in response to his organization wanted him to be at the same level so they would take this stuff seriously. And he was the first CISO. But we also had this impression of security back then. There was kind of this, when you talk to the security department, this is kind of what you would get.
Yeah, no. No! 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 I said no!
Yeah, so, you kind of get that kind of stuff, right? And that's what people thought of us as the police. So then we move into the regulatory compliance era, and this is when we saw HIPAA, GLBA, all these laws coming out, the FISMA laws, and all of those, what they did is how they helped security is they required a security officer. And this is really the start of that. And then about 2004, 2008, because everybody was using these as a checklist to show that they were secure, we moved into a risk-oriented area. And this is where we came out with the development of all the GRC tools that we have today. And so everybody's talking about risk. We can't do everything, so we're going to bring risk. Then when we had solved the security problem and everything, we were looking at it from risk, we were applying all the controls we needed to, everything was perfect, and then along came Facebook and iPhones and the cloud and all these other vectors. The other stuff didn't go away, we just added this stuff, right? That was about 2008 to 2016. Well, I think we're in a new phase. 2016 to 2020s, it's the privacy and the data aware CISO. The CISO that's going to succeed in the future has to know where the information is and how they're protecting it. That's really what it comes down to. It's not the technologies they need to know. Somebody else can do that. But this person needs to know in their organizations where that stuff is. There's a lot of forces against the CISO. External forces around compliance, internal, external audits, different social trends. Consumers want devices. They want the new whiz-bang thing that's connected to the internet. All of these things are going to drive us in the future. It's kind of an eye chart here. What this really says is that we had a CISO that has been going down this path, which I think I kind of summarized in the prior thing. Breaches were not really communicated as broadly as they are today, and they weren't at the same scale that they were today either. Didn't mean that we didn't have them, it meant that we weren't reporting them. So where do they get promoted? Do they get promoted from within? The Fortune 500 CISOs, the average tenure is 4.5 years. I saw somebody else today say it was 2 years in the roundtable discussion that Mike had. Other people have said 17 months. We kind of bounce around this stuff, but what's starting to happen in the Fortune 500, CISOs are actually staying in place longer, in part because companies are seeing they can't get things done in such a short period of time. I mean, Mike made a very valid point today. People get a security awareness program in place in the first 2 years and then they're gone. And not much else. So starting to see that. Few Fortune 100 were first-time CISOs, but the rest of the Fortune 500 is okay with that. So if you want a job in one of the Fortune 100 companies, you're not going to get that unless you've been a CISO in a smaller organization. 4% of the CISOs have an SVP title. Might surprise you, it's a very small number. And 2/3 of those are external hires. The promotion is not coming from within the organizations. They're going outside. 59% of the Fortune 500 CISOs were external hires. So as people are doing their career planning, they have more faith in somebody that's coming in from the outside that has the right skills than their own staff. So Gartner says we need to have operational, technical, and business and leadership skills. Certifications helpful, but not really mandatory. 10 to 20 years. So the person who wants the CISO right away may not be in that best position. They want that person to have the breadth across the organization. Vertical and industry experience helpful, but not a requirement. So if you're going from, finance to healthcare or healthcare to finance, it used to be that was a big thing. People were looking for that skill in that area. I think because of the unemployment rate is so low in this space, people aren't looking at it that way as much anymore. Because you can learn those things. Business and risk-based backgrounds need to gain tech knowledge first. I'll just read this. We're on the verge of a revolution that's as profound as the change in the economy that came with the Industrial Revolution. Soon, electronic networks will allow people to transcend the barriers of time and distance and take advantage of global markets, business opportunities not even imaginable today, opening up a new world of economic possibility and progress. Anybody know who said this? What? Alvin Toffler? No? Anybody else have a guess? The inventor of the internet, Al Gore, said this in 1997. So this is like 20 years old news, right? So here we are in 2018. Let's go back to 1998 and look at how the world was. So we had no Facebook, we had phones. Remember phones, wired phones? We had VCRs. We didn't have any iPads, iPods, no USB sticks. We went to Blockbuster. Everybody still have their Blockbuster card? Where you got, if you didn't rewind your tape, you got a little bit of a fine. Flat screen TVs were around 20 years ago, but they were $9,000 per 50-inch. We were working on Y2K, which everybody changed their infrastructures. We had paper maps in cars. And so, navigation systems came out later, And people thought, oh God, people are going to be so distracted. Well, how distracting was it when people were holding up this big frickin' map in the passenger seat trying to find something, and then you missed your turn, and then you know, everybody's getting stressed in the car versus somebody telling you recalculating, right? That's a little bit better. But there were these two men that took a look at what was going on, and they wanted to understand, what is it that leading firms do around cybersecurity practices? Remember, this is 20 years ago. So here's what they did. The government spent a whole bunch of money and they came up with a report. And they said they do these 5 basic things. They assess risk and determine needs. They implement policies and controls in reaction to that. They promote the awareness so people know what they're supposed to do. They monitor and evaluate it. And then that goes back into assessing the risk and the needs, and it needs to be centrally managed by somebody. Now that sounds so simple to us today, but how often can we look at our organizations and see exactly where we're failing in one of these areas? All these components need to be done to have a successful program. So, bringing this forward, I brought this forward 20 years, and we have to look at what does this mean for us today? So we have risk. We're looking at things like reputational risk. Privacy concerns as part of that. Compliance and regulation, third-party vendor relationships. We're spending a lot of time and money in our organizations on that today. The emerging laws and regulations, and also the emerging technologies. That's part of our risk posture. And then we have all the policies and controls. We need a framework. Actually, in the book, I put 13 frameworks in the book, and I got bored. And I decided it was really time to stop, okay? Because I think we've covered it off. Just pick one and go. None of them are better than the others. They have different purposes, and we could argue about what those are and which one is best for the organization. But if you pick one and stick to it, that's really what's really important. Awareness. We've moved to phishing campaigns and user pre-testing for those campaigns. We've migrated to online learning. And having people go after certifications. To monitor, we're doing internal and external scanning. We're looking at our web applications. We're bringing in threat intelligence, joining ISACs. We have managed services. We have SIM. We have machine learning, AI analytics. We can debate on the value of that. I was leading a panel this morning. We were talking about AI analytics, machine learning with 6 CISOs. Varying opinions. Some are well down that path. Others, you know, it's still the buzzword. We also have to develop those relationships across all the different C parties that we have in our environments. Very important. We need to understand what is it that they need as stakeholders. What is it our legal department needs? What is it that our CIO needs? And how do we meet those needs? And then we need to be involved in these oversight committees. And I wouldn't create a new committee for security. I think it's better, take an existing committee, take an existing meeting that's already on their agenda, because these are busy people. Add security as a standing business item on that agenda. And I'm not talking about the board, I'm talking about within the organization, how we're managing the day-to-day work. We have, in talking with the board, the 5 principles, the NACD. I think these are great because it tells our boards what they're supposed to do. Directors need to understand and approach cybersecurity as an enterprise-wide risk management issue, not an IT issue. I think it's kind of funny we call it cybersecurity, but we say don't treat it as an IT issue. Why don't we call it information security? But we're well past that whole religious debate. Principle number 2, directors need to understand the legal implications of cyber risks as they relate to their company's specific circumstances. Boards need to have adequate access to cybersecurity expertise. And what I like about this is they need to have regular and adequate time on the agenda. And this is why we're starting to see this on board agendas. And you know, this document, oddly enough, came out right after the Target breach. Which I think was, you know, now the board's paid attention to that. Directors should set the expectation that management will establish an enterprise-wide cyber risk management framework. So this says pick one and run with it. And then the last point here is just make sure that we're dealing with risk, transferring it, accepting it, whatever we're doing, that there's a real decision that's being made around that risk. I pulled all this stuff together, and I'm using, I decided to use an old model, the McKinsey 7S framework. Anybody familiar with that? Okay, a few of you are. So it's like this model has not been applied to cybersecurity. And I decided to do this for the main reason that here we have a model that talks about organizational effectiveness within an organization. Why are we not treating our CISO roles as we want to be effective within the organization? So there's really the 7 S's: structure, system, style, staff, skills, strategy, and shared values. And if we excel in all those, we can do well. If we're not good in any one of those, it affects our strategy, and we will not achieve it. So here's the different components of that. We need to develop a vision and strategy for cybersecurity. We need to look at the emerging technologies and trends to inform that strategy. We need to define the security functions that are important to us. We need to define who reports to who in that model. We need to leverage the incidents. We need to have security control frameworks. These are the systems of the CISO that we use. Risk management practices. And then we have skills, the CISO soft skills that are needed. And then for staff, we need to look at the multi-generational work dynamics. We have multiple generations. We also have different personality types, so we need to look at both of those dimensions. As far as shared values, we have data protection and privacy to look at, laws and regulations that we need to be aware of, policies and procedures for those shared values, and then for style, that's our CISO interaction with the board and our senior executives. And you bring all that together, and now we've brought the McKinsey model to cybersecurity. So this is a book I've written. It's coming out next month. It's on Amazon, but and this really embodies all those things around the CISO role that have been put in that. So thank you very much. Do we have time for a question or? No time for questions. Thank you very much. Thank you.